Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with another Books Beside My Bed video, and this is for the first week of July, the 1st to the 7th, and it is my first week of Tome Topple. Hang on, just noticed I'm getting glare off my glasses. Okay, so this is the first week of Tome Topple and I managed to get through 4 tomes, which is just kind of a bit mind-boggling, and I'm a little bit brain dead, I think, from reading so much, but I did enjoy everything that I read. Everything that I read is part of a series. 3 of them are sequels. One is the first book in a prequel series. So it's going to be interesting to see how I talk about these books, but let's get straight into it. So as I said, I read 4 books. That was a total of 2,405 pages, and I'm up to 120 books so far this year. The first book that I read this week is City of Mirrors by Justin Cronin. This is book 3 in the Passage trilogy. It was published in 2016 by Orion, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This series is phenomenal. Obviously, being book 3, I can't really talk too much about the plot, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with the series, it is a series that spans about 1,000 years from beginning to end. And in each book, you sort of jump around in the timeline a little bit, so you do have to pay a bit of attention, and it's quite literary, given the fact that it is a book that deals with a type of vampire mythology, and it has a bit of science thrown in, a bit of literary stuff thrown in, and it is really all about the characters, and it is just incredible. So humanity has been essentially wiped out by this plague that resembles vampirism as we know it. And in book 3, they believe that the plague is finally over, and yet there are still things out there in the night, and the last sort of holdouts of humanity have to find a way to deal with what's left of the plague and try and find a way to rebuild the world, or in this case the United States, because the entire thing takes place in the United States. It is just a great series, and it is not for someone who doesn't like a lot of world building, because I mean this is a hefty book and it is full of world building and everyday stuff that the characters go through. Most of the characters we've now followed for 3 books, and we've sort of seen their history with each other and how they've grown and how they've changed over time. And it was just really, really fascinating. I'm really glad that I read this series, and it's not one that I would have picked up on my own. It was mentioned to me by my parents and they said, oh, maybe you read this and maybe you might like it. And I'm so glad that I did, even though every time I went to pick up one of the books, I got severely intimidated. Books 2 and 3, I think, are my favorite. The first book is really great as well, but there's a huge chunk in the middle that I remember sitting there going, I don't know what I'm reading. But books 2 and 3 I just adored. So yes, highly recommend this. The second book that I read this week was Abaddon's Gate by James S. A. Corey. This is book 3 in the Expanse series. A lot of book 3s going on here. It was first published in 2013 by Orbit, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I love this series. It is a great space opera thing that just has such sweeping scope in the solar system. Again, book 3, it's really hard to talk about this series, but it does still follow the crew of the Rossi, Holden and his team. This book picks up where book 2 left off, and the strange alien organism that was building an artifact on Venus. The artifact, it has mysteriously appeared in Uranus's orbit, and everyone, Earth, Mars and the Belt, are all trying to find out what it is and sending representatives. And of course the crew of the Rossi get caught up in it, and it is just really good fun. The one thing that I will say is I was a little bit disappointed that Bobby and Christian weren't in this book, because they're some of my favourite characters, so we didn't really get their perspective. This one dealt a little bit with theology as well, which was really interesting, and I like that sort of stuff, particularly in my science fiction. I just thought it was really great, and there were, you know, a whole lot of action sequences. It did take about 100 pages to get into the serious action, so just beware of that going into it. But once it kicked off, it didn't stop, and I couldn't put the book down. Then I read The Book of Dust, Volume 1, La Belle Sauvage by Philip Pullman. This is the prequel to the His Dark Materials series, which I finished last week, so you knew I was going to pick this up pretty quickly. This was published in 2017 by David Fickling Books, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This one was an interesting read, so I can talk a little bit more about it because it's the first book in a series, and it tells the story of a young boy named Malcolm who is the son of an innkeeper, and he does lots of odd jobs around the inn, and he also works with the nuns in the local priory as well. And he has this wonderful boat called the Belle Sauvage, and he dreams one day of going sailing, but at the moment it's just a small boat, and he uses it to travel around the local towns on the river. Malcolm finds himself caught up in the strange fate of Lyra, who is at the time of this book 6 months old and has just been taken away from her parents, and they've tried to find somewhere safe for her to live. But there's a whole lot of things that are happening around it, and Lyra isn't safe, and Malcolm and a local girl named Alice manage to rescue her during a freak flood that suddenly sweeps across England, and they have to protect her and keep her safe. All the while, there's all these really strange things going on, and you've got all sorts of myths, Arthurian myths are woven into this, and you've got gods and goddesses, and you've got fairies, and it's just this really strange combination of things that shouldn't work but really do. And I mean, it's testament to Philip Pullman that he can pull all of these threads together and make this story quite engaging. The one thing I will say is that I found this one a little bit slower to get into than his Dark Materials series, because we're not dealing so much with the content of that, even though things like dust are mentioned really briefly, and you do get to see a few characters very briefly from the original trilogy. It was still a really good read, and I'm glad that I read it, and I'm looking forward to the next installment in the Book of Dust. And the fourth book that I read this week was The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. This is book 2 in, I don't even know what the series is called, Mime Order series. And yeah, okay. This was published in 2015 by Bloomsbury. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I have some issues with this series, and it's not because it's badly written. I do actually quite like Samantha Shannon's writing style. I don't know, I don't really like the characters in the series, and it makes it really hard for me to read it. Like I'm sitting there reading it going, come on, can we just get on with it? Because it is very detailed. There's a lot of world building. The first book had a lot of info dumping, and you didn't get as much of that in here. Book 2 finds Paige back in London and trying to warn people about the RFAM, but she comes up against a lot of resistance from the people that she knows. Yeah, there's a lot of to and fro, and it just felt like there was a lot of stuff being said over and over again, to be perfectly honest. I don't particularly like Paige as a character. I like Warden, even though he's really problematic, and I don't mind their scenes together. I actually find those really interesting. I think the dynamic is quite clever with the two characters, but you know, Paige on her own just didn't really do anything for me, and I just wish that I wish that I enjoyed this more, but I keep thinking it's something it's not. And I think that's the problem. I know a lot of people really love this series, and it's not bad at all. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because, I mean, what the world she's created is really interesting, I guess. It just slips more into that paranormal fantasy, more fantasy element than I would probably like. So, I don't know. I'm torn. Okay, so those are the books that I read this week, and it's only 4 books, but it's really heavy. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books. I'm especially curious if you've read the Passage trilogy, because that's not one that I hear a lot of people talk about. So definitely let me know in the comments if you've read any and what your thoughts are on them, or if you're planning on reading them. I don't think I'm going to continue with the Samantha Shannon series. I think I'm done. Being relatively ambivalent on the first 2 books, I don't really think I'm going to continue, which makes me a little bit sad, but yeah. I still have 4 books sitting on my Tome Topple pile because I found another book that was over 500 pages, so I don't know which of them I'm going to get to be perfectly honest. I think I'm going to take it pretty easy, maybe read some smaller books, because yeah, reading things over 500 pages, it takes a lot of energy. Oh, and in really exciting news for me anyway, because I'm a geek like this, I finally moved my blog over to WordPress, and so the new blog address is linked down below, and I'll pop it on the screen as well in case you're interested in checking it out. That's where I do publish my book reviews, and I'm very excited to have that blog now moved over because I love using WordPress. It's one of my favorite platforms to use, and I'm very familiar with it, and it's just nice to be back somewhere where I'm comfortable. Yeah, it was my goal these holidays to get that done, and I have, so I'm very excited. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.